Our GM in resident, Cliff, is going to be giving us some GMing tips again this week. 3 tips for running an efficient campaign, GMing efficiently. And take it away, Cliff.
When you GM a game, it can seem like a lot of work, and it can seem like that way because, it usually is. I'm not going to lie to you, but it's a lot of fun. But you want to make the most of the time that you put into your prep. So here's my 3 tips for making good use of your GM prep time. Tip number 1, create a Google Doc or something of the sort and encourage all of your players to use it to take notes. So the key is there's a single document that everyone can log into and type things in, and you can offer an in-game incentive if necessary, a bonus karma, edge, Benny, experience points, whatever, to get your players to take good notes for you. It won't unbalance your game, and those player notes, I can tell you, are a lifesaver. They don't just help to remind you of important details that might otherwise have been lost. They also communicate to you what the players are paying the most attention to. Bit of a bonus tip, I guess, thinking of this at the beginning of your sessions, when you do a recap, have your players do it. This gives you a good impression of your players' expectations and also helps to show that you aren't a bad gamer for not remembering everything, because everyone else will forget things too. Everyone has a little bit of trouble getting back into the game, remembering how past events play out, especially if you have more than a week between sessions. So let's bring this up for discussion. Bobby, do you think it hurts the game experience if you give out in-game rewards to encourage out-of-game behavior, like giving out bonus XP for players taking good notes?
I absolutely do not think that it hurts the game experience or even really imbalances things. It's my opinion that more fun makes the game more fun. So
it's a bold statement, Bobby, but I think I'm with you there.
Yeah, so giving more things to people, and it's not like you're asking them to do like if you take notes, we're just gonna jump you up 2 levels every time. That's not what you're saying. But giving a little bit of a reward is an incentive, and it gives people, it sort of greases the wheels a little bit to getting things moving forward at the same time as incentivizing people, and everyone's getting it. Everyone has the same opportunity, so it doesn't unbalance things. I'm all for it. I think that's a great idea.
You've been playing in an Earthdawn campaign I've been running for a long time, where we do this process. What do you think about it? Especially with that, the Earthdawn has that mechanic built into reward note taking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the fact that Earthdawn says, "Hey, if you take notes, like here's how you can turn those notes in and gain fame for yourself." Yeah, I the way we do it, we play every other week, and sometimes if we miss a week, then it's a month in between sessions, and I cannot keep track of everything. So it is an extreme benefit to myself and to other characters to have not only the Google Doc where we can take notes and add things, but also what you said about when you gather, the first thing that you do is say, okay, who wants to recap things, right? You do that in both the games I play with you. And I don't know if you did this on purpose.
Don't have to, right?
Right. I was going to say, I've never thought that you do this so that you don't have to until you just said it.
That. Yes, it's partly that.
But I remember, instead of saying something like, well, I know I'm the GM, but I don't remember what happened last time, you say, so who wants to recap? And you listen for them to say what they remember, and people will fill in. The other players will fill in if we miss anything, and then that allows you to be like, "Oh yeah, okay, good. Now I know where their head was at. I know what they were thinking, what they thought was important, and it kind of brings you back up to speed too." Those are all win-wins, and the silly amount of bonus karma or bonus experience or whatever that GMs might give out for this. I mean, it's not going to imbalance the game, but it's certainly going to be appreciated by the players. I know I appreciate it every time. There's never been one time where I thought the GM was being like, man, he's giving us too much XP. This is ruining the game. Like, I've never had that feeling. I've had
a dissenting opinion on this. I know you've probably had to do a lot of note stuff on the fly with Join the Anarchy. Do you offer any bonus incentives for that, or is that just part of what was expected of everyone?
I mean, for Join the Anarchy, I was just taking the notes. I kind of expected everybody to take the notes, but I do like the concept. I've always meant to do it. And then the one time that I decided, all right, who wants to recap? I just got a bunch of blank stares because everyone was like, wait, we were supposed to remember what happened. You're supposed to tell us what happened. And,
that brings up a good point, because what this point brings about that I'm trying to get to, like the core issue is not just the GM's job to remember everything. It is also the player's responsibility, and sharing that responsibility makes it so much easier for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then of course there's the thing of like, it gets frustrating sometimes when like you bring up a plot point that you thought people remembered, and then they're like, wait, who was that person again? Or what was that about? Or whatever. And it's like, if you had done your recap, maybe you would actually remember, like we could just keep reinforcing these recurring things. Right. So yeah, I could see why this is a huge benefit. So
I got 2 more tips to get to. So let's move on to my second tip. And that is stat blocks. This might not apply if you're doing a more narrative heavy game, which honestly, you probably don't need those stats to worry about anyway. But for many other role-playing games, having simple, concise stat blocks with all the bonuses figured in so you can look at it as a glance is really by far one of the most efficient and effective uses of my time as my GM prep. So what I do for this is I'll make up my stat blocks for a Crunchy RPG session. I'll write out the relevant information as concisely as possible. I don't need to know where the bonuses are all coming from, which spells are on, etc. All I need to know is what the final numbers are for the attack rolls or spell casting or dice pools or whatever. If something might be dispelled or disabled, I like to write the improved stat in parentheses next to the unmodified stat, and this tells me that something is boosting it, which might be situational. I've got these images here. I think I got them to Bobby in time, if you wouldn't mind popping those up. First one, here's what a typical Shadowrun 5th edition stat block that I use looks like. Notice that I don't bother using or writing down the skill ranks. In many cases, I don't even write down the skills, right? I've got magic stuff or guns, right? I just write down the dice pools that I need. I don't want to be looking around the character sheet to find all the numbers, like the sorcery ranks, and then find their magic rating and add those up and see if there's bonuses for my quality. Blah, not during the game. No, thank you. It's all about making sure that I have exactly what information I need right when I need it and don't have to crunch numbers or think about it. Here's another stat block from my D&D 3.5 days to just give you another look. And again, I've got this all pretty simply boiled down. If you go looking at things that I didn't actually like properly make this up with my old D&D books, I just kind of approximate it as best I can. So don't burn me at the stake if I didn't get all the numbers adding up right. But I don't need to know what the base attack bonus is. I just need to know what my attack bonus is with my sword and how much damage it does. I need to know what my saves are, if I've got a potion. I just boil things down to the most simple information so I can just glance at it during the game session and not have to think past what I need at that moment. So bonus tip on this, though, too, is when you make up your stat blocks for an adventure, save them for the next one. Whenever you write up an adventure and need to create those stats for NPCs, enemies, boss fights, put them in a file or a sheet of paper, index cards or whatever, so you can save it separately from your adventure notes and keep them somewhere central that you can reference later. So if you've already made up an Orc Street Samurai to ambush your runners when they were going up against the Crimson Crush, you don't have to make up another Orc Street Samurai in detail ever again. Just pull out the old stat blocks from before, either use them as is or change some small detail. Something as simple as swapping out their Uzi 3 for an AK-97 or wearing a ballistic mask instead of a helmet is all you need to differentiate. Trust me, your players will never suspect you of cutting corners. So the question I have for you all here is a little bit related to this. Do you all design your own NPC stats from scratch or look for ones you can pull out of the books, published material? Opti, how about you? You've been
I am
running a lot of D&D.
Yeah, I'm the I'm the worst. D&D 4th had a thing where you can just go online and punch in, I want this creature and I want it at this level, and it would print out all the stats for you. So I use that all the time. But like that would be an amazing thing for any RPG game to have. It's just, go online, type in the thing you want, and be able to alter the stats or add the stats or give it a power. That was the most helpful thing as a GM. But in Shadowrun, I I have 12 dice if they're competent for anything. I have 15 if they're super good at something, and 18 if they're incredible. And I pretty much just use those dice pools for everything, and I try to just flow with the rest. I'm not a very great Shadowrun GM as far as mechanics go. I lean way more heavy into the story, and so I love the idea though of the dice pools being the thing that's most important on the sheet, not getting super fiddly with all of their stats. Like, you should not, I don't want to make a hard and fast rule, but for me, I should not be wasting my time creating the smallest details on my NPCs. I need to be creating, if I want to, creating memorable things for them to say and do and to be, or even just creating a whole bunch of them that I can pull from. But if I'm wasting too much time on every NPC, that's more time I'm not going to have to do something else.
And I want to push back on the idea that you're not a good GM for not having the absolute correct numbers, because at the end of the day, those absolute correct numbers, what they do is they create a guideline, or not even like they create the standard, right? Like, this is what you're supposed to roll during this. This is what you're supposed to roll during that. But if you as a GM are operating, these are my standard dice pools for what they roll, then that's still standard. So there is you're not just making things up and hoping that they turn out right. You already have, these are the rules in your head of like what they should be rolling, and you just go with that. So it is still as fair and less time consuming than using actual stat blocks.
Yeah.
So, Bobby, I'm curious, when you were doing the complex action actual play, were you making up your own NPC stats, or were you finding stat blocks elsewhere you could use? Because I know you're not a very crunch-focused GM either.
Yeah.
Confess.
As far as like getting all the... I mean, you're very much a math crunch person. I get that, but...
Yeah.
But,
so when I'm GMing something, when I'm running a game, I am I'm a real prepper. And so when I was doing
I would not have guessed.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you for not be like that's
That was sarcastic. I totally would have guessed.
Okay. But anyway, so I prep a ton. So I always had the stats ready, but I always regretted prepping so much. I just couldn't get out of the cycle and habit of prepping so much, right? I always regretted it for exactly the reasons that everybody else has already said, especially what Oz was just emphasizing, which is that there are so many times when I would run across a moment in the story where I was like, this doesn't work, or I don't have something ready for this, or, oh, I didn't think about this. It really would have made sense for them to have this, and I just have to make it up.
Because you are segueing perfectly into my third tip for tonight.
All right, good.
Plots and schemes. So let's move on to that. And this, I've got to say, is my biggest lazy GM tip. As far as plotting and scheming, my tip is don't bother drafting a plot for all the scenes in your adventure. You don't know what your players are going to do, and it is a waste of your time that you will regret if you set up a bunch of scenes that might not even happen. Even worse, deciding on where the adventure is going to go up ahead of time takes agency away from the players and makes you much more likely to railroad. You'll be personally invested in utilizing the material that you spent time and effort creating, and you might even feel personally hurt when your players don't follow your expectations, as if they're rejecting you and your ideas instead of just engaging with the game in their own way. So when I prep for an adventure, the only scene that I have clearly in mind, usually, is the one that gets the player characters involved. After that, I let the player's choices and the consequences of their actions lead to the next scene. I might have a vague idea that I want to do a cool car chase and have the rules for chase combat handy, just in case, but I'm not going to write up a whole chase scene with stats for everyone that might get involved, because if the car chase doesn't happen, it's because the players decided to do something else, and that's much more interesting to me. So, but keep an eye out for future videos about GMing on the fly. I find improvisational GMing to be much more rewarding than running preconceived adventures, and I'll have a lot more to say on that subject. But for now, well, I was going to ask what tips Bobby, Oz, and Opti might have for us from their experiences prepping to GM games, but I thought the abstruse one, or Daryl in the chat here, also brought up a really good one. He says that he likes to make sure they have a page relevant with info I need as a GM. Using D&D as an example, I have the name, class, species, background, AC, and passive perception for each PC. That way I don't have to waste time asking the goblin rolled a 15 attack. Does that hit? Because you would know the number it needs to hit. I can just jump in straight to the goblin hit, missed, narrate, and if necessary, roll damage. And I don't have to tip them off asking what's your passive perception when there might be a trap or secret door or hiding NPC or monster. So yeah, those are all good points there. That's a level of bookkeeping that I don't like to go to. I would just rather ask them what it is. But that the perception and trap thing, that's an especially nice point for that. I think for D&D I might have to lean that direction more. So thank you very much for that. Oz, I want to ask you, as probably the one most well-known for improvisational GMing with Join the Anarchy, how did you handle plot development for it when you couldn't prep?
Yeah, so what I would do is I would consider the things that have occurred, and then my job, like, and this was just musing, I'm in the shower, I'm at work, I'm doing whatever, like anything where I'm just kind of letting my brain wander. And my prep is basically trying to justify things that occurred that I couldn't answer right then and there. And then that's when dots would start to connect. And I would have kind of like a map in my head of motivations and characters that were involved in the story and affecting the story in some way. So when things would come up that I felt could tie into it, then I'm able to kind of create a feedback loop of, oh, let me bring this back, and then that gives the feeling of a forward momentum story that's just being created, and which it was. And then if something is just totally off the rails, now it's a brand new thing that I have to justify. So on my next time when I'm considering why was this happening, then I can start thinking, oh, I can tie it in to something else, or maybe this is actually leading down a brand new path. And then I just basically follow at that time whatever I thought was most important, most relevant that the players and the audience too was giving me.
That's all really useful, and I think brings up some great ideas about how to approach running things. Not having scenes in mind, but picking up on the motivations and story elements that occur throughout play. And going off the rails isn't something to be afraid of. I honestly think it's the ideal. Better if you don't have rails to begin with, but it also helps to give your players a cue to follow for getting started. But Bobby and Opti, unless you have something you want to jump in and add here, I think I'm just going to move on.
Yeah,
but,
go for it.
I don't want to. If you've got a super awesome tip you're just dying to share, don't let me roll over you.
I love your tips. So.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this discussion. I expect many of you out there on the internet will have something to add. Did I screw up big time and not reveal the biggest, most effective GM prep tips ever? I hope not, but I bet you thought of at least one thing I should have mentioned. So maybe you think my ideas are garbage and need to set the record straight for the sake of the internet. Please help a fellow GM out and share your thoughts with us. Well, actuallys and attaboys are both welcome. Whack them down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please do the YouTube things. Let us know in the comments, like, share, subscribe, strike that notification bell, join us live every Sunday. Thank you for watching.